You don't belong here. A father's revelation that leaves everyone speechless. It was a serene Saturday afternoon in San Diego, and the boutique buzzed softly with the understated activity of its clientele. The elegant store, adorned with racks of designer dresses and displays of luxury handbags, radiated an aura of exclusivity. Soft jazz notes wafted through the air, harmonizing with the muffled conversations of shoppers engrossed in browsing. Sunlight streamed through expansive glass windows, casting reflections on the polished floors that seemed to amplify the store's sophistication. Among the patrons, a young black girl, no older than 12, wandered through the aisles unaccompanied. Her name was Amara. She wore a plain hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, an attire that stood in stark contrast to the typical clientele, who often flaunted couture pieces and statement accessories. Amara wasn't causing a disturbance. She moved with quiet curiosity, her eyes absorbing the vibrant displays of high-end fashion. She refrained from touching the items, merely observing, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Behind the counter, the sales associates exchanged subtle glances, their expressions unreadable, but their attention clearly drawn to her. Though none approached, their furtive looks suggested they were questioning her presence. She appeared out of place, at least in their eyes, but Amara moved as though she belonged, unruffled by the unspoken judgment around her. As Amara gravitated toward a display of silk scarves, the tranquility of the store shifted. A striking woman in her late 40s strode into the boutique. Her platinum blonde hair was styled to perfection, a pearl necklace gleamed against her tailored blazer, and her heels clicked authoritatively against the polished floor. She exuded an air of command, as though she wasn't merely shopping but asserting her presence. Her sharp gaze landed on Amara almost immediately. Her lips tightened, her demeanor stiffening as if the girl's very existence disrupted the carefully curated atmosphere of the boutique. For a moment, the woman lingered near the entrance, feigning interest in a nearby display. Yet her attention was fixed on Amara, her scrutiny becoming increasingly apparent. Amara, either oblivious or indifferent to the woman's watchful eyes, continued exploring. She reached out gently, her small fingers brushing the edge of a vibrant scarf. The fabric's softness seemed to captivate her for a fleeting moment, but her calm demeanor remained unshaken. Meanwhile, the woman's expression hardened further. Irritation bubbled beneath her polished exterior, transforming the boutique's ambiance into something tense and uneasy. The woman's discontent soon escalated. Abandoning the pretense of browsing, she set down the handbag she had been inspecting and strode purposefully toward Amara. Her heels echoed sharply against the floor, each step amplifying the anticipation. Shoppers nearby subtly turned their heads, sensing the brewing confrontation but hesitant to intervene. Stopping just short of invading Amara's personal space, the woman spoke in a tone that was both sharp and condescending. "Excuse me," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to issuing commands. "Can I help you with something?" Startled but composed, Amara turned to face her. "No, thank you. I'm just looking," she replied, her voice polite but firm. The woman's eyebrow arched, her disbelief almost palpable. "Looking?" she repeated, her tone laced with thinly veiled disdain. "This isn't the kind of store where people just look." Amara blinked, her confusion evident, but her poise unbroken. "I'm waiting for someone," she explained, her voice steady. "I'm not bothering anyone." The woman crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing as she assessed Amara with open skepticism. "Waiting for someone? Here?" she retorted, the incredulity in her voice unmistakable. "And who might that be?" Nearby shoppers exchanged uncomfortable glances, their whispers barely audible. The sales staff, uncertain of how to proceed, remained rooted behind the counter, their unease evident in their furtive discussions. The woman's tone grew louder, drawing the attention of everyone in the boutique. "I don't think you belong here," she declared bluntly. "This is a high-end boutique, not a playground. If you're not planning to buy anything, you should leave." Amara's expression tightened slightly, but she stood her ground. "I have every right to be here," she replied, meeting the woman's piercing gaze with quiet determination. "I'm not doing anything wrong," the woman scoffed, her condescension thick enough to cut through the room's now oppressive silence. Right. And who exactly are you waiting for? Your parents? Shouldn't they be supervising you? The boutique fell silent. Every eye was now trained on the unfolding confrontation. Amara, undeterred, responded with unwavering calm. "I'm waiting for my dad," she stated firmly. The woman let out a derisive laugh, as though the idea were preposterous. "Your dad?" she asked, her voice dripping with doubt. "And where exactly is he?" Before Amara could reply, a commanding voice broke the silence. Deep and resonant, it cut through the tension like a knife. "Right here." Every head turned toward the entrance, where a tall man in an impeccably tailored navy blue suit stood. His presence was magnetic, exuding the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to authority. His sharp features and poised demeanor were impossible to ignore. He strode into the boutique with measured steps, the muted sound of his polished shoes amplifying his gravitas. The woman's composure faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly recovered. "And you are?" she asked, her tone edged with skepticism, as though challenging his authority to intervene. The man stopped beside Amara, resting a protective hand on her shoulder. "I'm her father," he said simply, his voice calm, yet charged with an unspoken warning. The boutique, once alive with whispers and quiet activity, now stood in absolute silence. Even the faint jazz overhead seemed to fade into the background as all eyes locked on the man. "This is a luxury boutique," the woman murmured, her voice faltering as her confidence began to waver. Her sentence trailed off mid-thought, as if she suddenly realized how damning it would sound if she continued. The man watching her tilted his head slightly, his expression calm but unreadable. "You don't usually see what?" he asked, his voice steady yet heavy with implication. The question lingered in the air, weighted and unrelenting. "I didn't mean any harm," she stammered quickly, her tone cracking under the tension. "I just thought she might be lost." "Lost?" the man interjected sharply, his tone controlled yet cutting. "She's not lost. She's here in this store like anyone else, and I'd like to know what gave you the impression she didn't belong." By now, the attention of the entire boutique had shifted. Shoppers, who previously had pretended not to notice the brewing conflict, were now openly watching. Their gazes darted between the man and the woman, some betraying unease, others silently relieved that someone was finally addressing the situation. "I was only trying to protect the store," the woman offered weakly, though her words sounded hollow, even to herself. The man raised an eyebrow, his gaze unwavering. "Protect the store? From what, exactly? A 12-year-old girl admiring scarves? Or is there something else you think she represents?" The woman's face flushed crimson, her carefully maintained composure crumbling beneath the intensity of his words. The room seemed to hold its breath, yet the true impact of the moment was still to come. A revelation loomed, ready to shatter any remaining doubts. The man took a measured step closer, his presence commanding the boutique's full attention. When he spoke, his voice was deliberate, cutting through the silence with undeniable authority. "Let me make something clear," he began, his tone firm but measured. "You are speaking to the CEO of the company that owns this very boutique." For a moment, the air seemed to freeze. The woman's eyes widened in shock, her mouth parting slightly as she struggled to process what she had just heard. A wave of murmurs and gasps rippled through the room, the onlookers exchanging stunned glances. Even the sales associates, previously rooted behind the counter, looked visibly taken aback, unsure how to respond. I didn't know," the woman stammered, her voice now a faint shadow of its earlier confidence. The man let out a humorless chuckle. "Didn't know," he echoed, his words laced with sharp irony. "No, you didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't bother to consider. You saw my daughter, made assumptions, and decided you had the right to treat her as though she didn't belong. You didn't stop to think she might have every right to be here, just like anyone else." Amara stood silently by her father's side, her expression calm, but her eyes gleaming with quiet pride. She had endured the woman's hostility without wavering, and now her father's defense of her carried a weight that silenced any opposition. The woman opened her mouth as if to respond, but no words came. Her gaze darted around the room, seeking support, but none was offered. The other shoppers, once passive observers, now regarded her with thinly veiled judgment. Discomfort had given way to disdain, and the room's collective disapproval was palpable. "I built this company from the ground up," the man continued, his voice unwavering. "Not so people like you could decide who belongs and who doesn't. Not so anyone could feel unwelcome in a space meant to be inclusive." One of the sales associates, a young man with a name tag reading Elliot, finally stepped forward. "Sir, we had no idea," he began, but the man raised a hand, silencing him with a calm yet firm gesture. "This isn't about you," the man said, his gaze fixed firmly on the woman. "But let this be a lesson for everyone here. Assumptions, judging someone by their appearance, age, or clothing, aren't just wrong. They're dangerous. They reinforce the worst parts of society and undermine everything we should stand for." The woman visibly shrank under his words, her earlier bravado reduced to nothing. She fidgeted nervously, her face flushed with shame. Her once commanding presence was now replaced by the unmistakable vulnerability of someone grappling with the gravity of their actions. I didn't mean for this to happen," the woman muttered, barely audible, her eyes darting between Amara and her father. Desperation crept into her voice. "I wasn't trying to be racist," the man interjected, finishing the sentence she couldn't bring herself to complete. "But your actions said otherwise." His tone wasn't angry, but it carried a blunt finality that left no room for excuses. "Maybe you didn't intend to be, but you looked at my daughter and saw a little black girl you decided didn't belong. That's the truth, isn't it?" The woman's face burned, but she didn't deny it. She couldn't. A voice broke the silence, a middle-aged shopper stepping forward from the crowd. "He's absolutely right," she said, her voice steady. "We all saw it. You judged her without knowing a thing about her." Others began nodding, murmurs of agreement spreading through the room. The collective judgment pressed down on the woman, and for a moment she appeared on the verge of tears. The man wasn't finished. His voice softened slightly, but it remained resolute. "It's not enough to feel bad now," he said. "What matters is what you do going forward. Will you keep letting your biases dictate how you treat others, or will you take this moment to learn and do better?" The woman swallowed hard, unable to respond. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, she gave a small, hesitant nod, her head bowing slightly in acknowledgement of her actions. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning, a tiny step toward reflection and accountability. The man turned to Amara, a gentle smile softening his previously commanding expression. "Are you ready to go, sweetheart?" he asked, his tone warm and reassuring. "Yes, Dad," Amara replied with a small nod, her voice steady but carrying a note of relief. As they moved toward the boutique's exit, the crowd instinctively parted to let them through. The atmosphere in the store was no longer heavy with confrontation, but with quiet introspection. Whispers floated through the air as shoppers leaned toward one another, their conversations now threaded with words like bias, respect, and change. Behind the counter, the sales staff exchanged meaningful glances, as if silently vowing to approach similar situations differently in the future. The boutique, once a space of exclusivity and silent judgment, now felt like a place transformed, not by decor, but by the undeniable weight of the lesson left behind. Amara and her father stepped out into the sunshine, the crisp afternoon air a stark contrast to the tension they had just left behind. Amara glanced up at her father, her expression one of gratitude. "Thank you, Dad," she said quietly, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. Her father looked down at her, his features softening into a kind smile. "You don't ever have to thank me for standing up for you," he said firmly. "But know this, I'll always be here when you need me." As they walked toward their car, the city bustled around them, the vibrant energy of San Diego seemingly worlds away from the charged moment in the boutique. Amara walked in silence for a moment before speaking, her voice curious but tentative. "Does that kind of thing happen to you a lot?" she asked, her tone reflective. Her father paused, his hand resting lightly on the car door as he considered his response. Sometimes, he admitted, not always as openly as what happened back there, but it happens. People see you, and they make assumptions. They think they know who you are just by looking at you. Amara frowned, the weight of his words settling on her young shoulders. Does it ever stop? Her father crouched slightly so they were eye to eye. His voice was steady, but tinged with hope. It might not stop completely, he said, but what matters is how we respond. We can't always control what other people think or do, but we can control how we handle it. And sometimes, standing tall and speaking the truth is the most powerful thing you can do. Amara nodded thoughtfully, her young face showing a depth of understanding beyond her years. I'm glad you were there, she said softly. It made me feel safe. You're never alone, Amara, he replied, his smile full of reassurance. Always remember that. As they climbed into the car, the boutique doors swung open behind them. The woman emerged, her face still flushed with embarrassment. She hesitated on the sidewalk, watching as Amara and her father drove away. Her expression was a mix of shame and uncertainty, as though she were grappling with the weight of her actions and the beliefs that had led her to behave as she did. For the first time, she seemed to question the assumptions she had held so tightly. Inside the car, Amara gazed out the window, her mind racing. She wasn't angry, she was pensive. After a moment, she broke the silence. Do you think she'll change? She asked, her voice quiet but curious. Her father glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his gaze warm, yet contemplative. I hope so, he said sincerely. Sometimes people need moments like that to really see themselves. But whether she changes or not, what's important is that we keep living with dignity and respect. That's what truly makes a difference. Amara nodded, a faint smile crossing her lips as she turned her attention back to the passing cityscape. What her father had taught her today wasn't just about standing up against prejudice, it was about the power of self-worth. No matter what others might assume, knowing your value and holding your head high could change not just your world, but the worlds of those around you. As their car disappeared into the busy streets, the boutique behind them remained quiet, its doors closing on an afternoon that would be remembered far beyond its walls. The lesson left behind, a stark reminder of the dangers of assumption and the power of kindness, rippled outward, touching every shopper, every staff member, and even the woman who had sparked it all. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Together, we can continue spreading messages of understanding, compassion, and respect. One story at a time, we can inspire the change the world so desperately needs.